Hello again, everyone, and this is Bill Acevedo, and I want to welcome you to this session of Dell EMC Tech Talk, Open Managed NM powered by Cruise Operations Center. You may also know this as Dell Open Managed Network Manager. The name is changing slightly to Dell Open Managed NM, so they are the same thing. So don't be alarmed by the change in name. So we're going to start our discussion today kind of giving a high-level overview of where we're at with server management and kind of lay the groundwork for what we're going to talk about. So on the left here, you see a single server image representing basically a server. The blue portion here is represents the physical hardware, and above that, typically we have operating systems or hypervisors, and on top of that, we're going to have apps, services, VMs, those sorts of things. And to put things in perspective today, we're going to be focusing in on what we generally do on the legacy side when we manage operating systems or hypervisors, and we're talking about Windows or Linux type operating systems, hypervisors, or even VMs. And so you'll see here in the middle, we have Windows, WMI, Linux, WebM, ESX WebM, even Acropolis hypervisor, that's just another hypervisor. These all support the standard WMI or WebM protocols that we typically use to manage from the operating system level. And so this is currently in the product, it's been in there for a long time, and allows us to manage and monitor the Windows, Linux, or hypervisors. These can be VMs as well, not just physical servers. So we can manage and monitor those as well as monitor CPU, disk, memory, and other items from those protocols. And so jumping down to the bottom here, I just want to point out in this schematic here that generally we're looking at the traffic NICs that are available on a server to access the operating system. For example, when we log into it, we're logging in through the traffic NICs. When we're logging into a Linux server that has SSH, we're generally going into the traffic NICs. The same with other ESX CLI or even PowerShell. Those are all coming in to the hypervisor or OS from these traffic NICs. And again, this may not be a server. It could be a desktop that has a NIC on it, that has Windows on it. Those can all be managed now with WMI or WebM through those NICs. Where we're going to focus today is on the new features, which is around the Baseboard Management Controller, also known as Remote Access Controller, to give us very nice hardware level access to CPU, memory, disk, and fan, those kind of things for monitoring, and a whole host of other things that we can get access to at that level. And so we're going to talk about a protocol called Redfish today. This is a newer and more standard way to access these remote access controllers. And these remote access controllers, I have a few listed here. We have Dell IDRAC, which is a very common one. They have probably the most mature implementation of this Redfish protocol. We have Cisco UCS, which is called their IMC, Integrated Management Controller, or the Lenovo XCC, the X Clarity Controller, or the HP ILO Integrated Lights Out. Those are some of the major ones and some of the more common ones. Any of the latest generation servers, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, should support some level of Redfish. And so on the Dell IDRAC side here, you'll see I pointed out that we can support basically version 7, 8, or 9 of IDRAC, and that's generally correlates to generation 12 servers and higher. So what we're going to talk about today is the ability to discover and manage and monitor the BMC we're going to focus on IDRAC today, but you're going to see things such as we're going to talk about Redfish alerting from the BMC. We have IDRAC support at the command line level, or this BMC at the command line level, so we can actually issue commands through this management port through CLI actions. We can get traps from the BMC or the IDRAC. We can have HTTP access to actually bring up the IDRAC GUI, for example. As I mentioned, we can do those rack admin commands through CLI, even JSON if we needed to. The Redfish is a REST API, so we are already using a REST API to do some of the functionality we're going to see. We're going to have the capability to reboot, just like you can through the IDRAC controller or the BMC controller, reboot, shut down, even turn on a server at that level. You're going to see that we have the ability to backup, restore configuration profiles, server configuration profiles for the IDRAC. And this is a very nice feature. That means that we can do just about anything with these configurations, including scanning them for compliance. We can compare them. We can push snippets back out to, just like a switch config, we can go out and affect that configuration file in the same way we can a switch config. And the nice thing here is we can do this in bulk. If we need to push out specific configuration settings to many servers, we're going to be able to do that. We're going to have the ability to update BIOS settings, see BIOS settings, and also deploy firmware to your BMC. And then, as I mentioned, we have one-to-one and one-to-many configuration through this port. So that's where we're going to focus today. And on the next slide here, this slide is a little bit busy, and it basically represents, could be a couple things here. This is a Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure. Think of this as just a rack of server nodes. Now we'll talk about, we have another feature we're introducing here in the first month of 2019 as well, where we can manage these hyperconverged infrastructures. But for the purpose of today's discussion, we're just going to look at this as a rack of server nodes. And so you might have all of these servers in your rack, and we're going to have the ability to go into each of these BMCs and manage that whole rack of server nodes. And this is what we do on a hyperconverged infrastructure as a consolidated unit. Okay, let's get on with a demo. So where I'm going to start today is how do you discover those management ports, the BMC, the IDRAC, or those other types of rack controllers. It's very simple. It's similar to our other discovery. Simply come into your profiles. I have one created already here. I'm going to use this as an example. We're simply going to create the profile, and I'm going to come in here, give it some sort of IP address range, and then we're going to add the protocols that we think are necessary for this particular set of devices. Now, you'll notice here that we have Redfish as the protocol that we select. Simply you go into create new and you select the Redfish protocol. That is the way we're going to discover that BMC controller. Other protocols you're going to want to add. You're going to want to add an SSH v2 interface. We're not going to use that for discovery, but it's going to come in handy when you want to run actions against that controller. If you want to access the IDRAC or the similar web UI for that particular controller, you're going to want to add an HTTPS interface. And like the others, you're going to add the credentials for those as well. You can also add an SNMP interface here if you want access to the MIBs on that. And so just be aware that you should add all of those at discovery time, so you don't have to go and manually add them later. So again, command line SSH, a web URL for a web HTTPS for a URL access, and then I would also add a SNMP one so that you can have access to the SNMP aspects of that if you need to. I think I have one in here just for a default SNMP. We would just add that in here, and that way we would have all the access to that functionality. So once we have those discovered, I'm going to show you what we see here. So generally we're going to see them represented by their Redfish discovery name. So we were gathering information here about the various aspects of the device. I'm going to show you some right-click options that we're going to have. I'm actually going to show you this on another system here. You're going to have the access through this management controller. You're going to have the ability to go control and reboot the device, shut it down, and actually turn it on. One other aspect that's not shown here that will be available probably in the first month of 2019 is the ability to see the BIOS settings through this option as well. So back to my other system here. I'm going to go and show you the topology here of what you might expect. So here's an example of where I have a top of rack switch, and I've got various of these IDRAC controllers attached here. So you're going to have access to all of the NICs here. I have 4 NICs on each server, and they're attached to these top of rack switch in some way. So you're going to have access to any event that comes in from this switch, reporting bandwidth, anything you get now on a switch through a port or interface in terms of reporting and monitoring. You're going to have the same access to monitor those to that server. And so these links will turn red, green, or yellow depending on any alert status, and you can drill into those from there. So I'm kind of a nice little graphical view of that. On our action side, as I mentioned, you're going to have command line access. Here's an example here of if I want to do an action to go in a rack admin command, I can just simply create one and add it here. I've seeded some in here for various things. If I just want to get BIOS versions, I can simply go in here and execute that action. It's going to go log into the rack admin directly onto that command line, and it's going to issue a command that's going to return some information that's very useful for us. Now, if you want to do this in bulk, I'll show you how to do that a little bit later through actions, but there you go. It's very easy to do. So it's showing you that command line access. I'm going to save the change determination and ProScan for when we get to those tabs on the top here. You're going to have the direct access here. As I mentioned, if you have a MIB browser, you can go right to that. You can go right to a terminal, and again, as I mentioned, you get right on the command line here, and it's going to get us right into the rack admin. I can simply run a rack admin command here if I need to. And anyway, I just showed you how we could do that, but you would simply just type in your command as you need to, just as if you were on a switch issuing some sort of command line. Another thing I wanted to show you here is on the HTTP side, if you want to get access directly to the, for example, an IDRAC interface, we could come in here and it's going to directly bring up that interface for us. So if you need to get on there to do something that you think you don't see or can't get to, normally you can just log in here and do that. All right, so let's dive into the details of what we see on these when we discover them. So you're going to see we collect a lot of information already about just these devices, just as we do with a switch or other network device. You're going to see we're monitoring temperature. CPU and memory will also be available once we release in the first quarter or first month of 2019. But you'll see here we've got a whole reference tree showing everything that we've discovered on that box, everything from fans, everything in the chassis. You can drill into the NICs. I'm going to collapse some of these so we can see some of these. Power supplies, and at each of these levels you can go in and get information about key metrics. For example, I can drill into CPU here and go to performance and see key metrics. And this is actually going to go out through the Redfish protocol, and it's going to go and interrogate the box and say what's happening right now in that box. And it's going to return whatever that attribute is from Redfish. And so here you see we've got a change in temperature of 0. We got the health status is okay, and the temperature Celsius of 66. So it's a very nice way to get an immediate feedback on a particular element of your remote access controller. You can also do the same thing from the top level here. If you do it from here on the key metrics, this is going to return the data for all of these, and so you're going to get a little bit of everything. Across the top here, we also see we have everything listed out basically in a tabular format. You can also go here and do performance as well to get a similar type of thing. Same with the disks. On the network storage side, you can see the NICs, that sort of thing. You can also go in here, do performance, and get the key metrics at that level if you need to. Power supplies and fans. It's similar to the reference tree. It's just a little bit different layout here for you to see that sort of information. Now, we will get alarms either from SNMP, from that controller, or there's also such a thing as a Redfish alert. So that protocol will actually generate alarms, and if we did have any, they would show up here. And this is actually just a different, an ACLI was run about, it's like a policy was run, and it showed that we were failing, and so you're seeing that sort of thing here. And then also the last thing here is on the maintenance tab, I want to point out that we will be collecting the service tag from this BMC controller for at least for Dell devices, and we will also have the warranty information here, similar to what we do with the switches that we have now. I did want to show you too from the top level here. You can right click and go to performance. I'll just show you those key metrics just to kind of give you an idea how you can get a quick view of what's going on in the device. Again, it's going out right through Redfish. It's going to interrogate it, pull back a bunch of information. This one pulls back a little bit more information, so it might take a second. The Redfish protocol does seem to be a tad slow in some cases. So here we go. We got the fan speed. Anyway, you can scroll through and basically get a quick view of everything, your health status, and scroll through all that if you need a quick look at things. Okay, the next thing I want to cover is on the, we'll jump over to the configuration management. So as I was mentioning, we can go into these devices and we can interrogate them various ways, but we can also get configuration back from these devices to get information that way. And so it's very simple to back these up. You can the same thing with switches where you can multi-select. You can do here as well, but I'm going to show you one here. So you basically go to File Management and you would just say Backup, and there's a variety of options in terms of what you might want to see from your backup file. You may want to see just specific information, and so this is the same dialog you get with normal switch, and so you can see you can add labels and all that sort of thing. You can back up in JSON or XML. It's really up to you. The default is XML. Just a matter of what you want, what's more readable to you. And then there's options here for how you want to basically export these, and there's various settings that are going to define how these get applied when you want to restore them. And these server configuration files can be very tricky, and so you want to make sure that you're not overwriting things that might take down your server, and so you want to set things in a particular way when you back them up or restore them. And so this gives you that capability, and you can include things like your hash values, or you make it read-only, or whatever you want there. And then you also have the option to do everything or just specific parts of the server configuration profile. And so you got BIOS, IDRAC, NIC, and RAID. So you simply just execute that. It's going to go back it up. And I will show you an example here of a file. You'll see I have a variety here that were picked up through ProScan. Here's one for just a NIC, and here's one in XML. But you can also just take a look at one of these in a JSON format. So this is all the information. Actually, this is just the RAID information from your server configuration profile. So you can actually go in here and edit these just like you can with another file. And say if you want to push something out, and maybe you want to make an entry true, you're going to save it, and you're going to get a more recent version of that. But I can basically go and compare two. I'm going to compare two that aren't really. Yeah, maybe I'll go here and compare these two here. I don't know if I have an XML compared to a JSON here, but let's just see what we got. Yeah, it looks like I'm comparing a JSON file to an XML file. So we don't want to do that necessarily. Here's two here. Of course, one's NIC and one's RAID, so you can see a lot of differences. But again, you can compare those, and you're going to see the differences pointed out there. So it's a very nice feature, again, to be able to back up all your server configuration files so that you can restore them later if you have a problem, restore a piece of it. It's a very nice way to update your systems very easily without necessarily having to go to a GUI. You can just set it in your configuration file, push it back out whenever you need to. The next thing I'm going to cover while we're on this page is images. Well, I don't have one here. You can deploy firmware to your BMC, and it's not just BIOS firmware. It could be your IDRAC firmware. It could be anything that would be normally updated through your BMC anyway. And the way you do that is you go in, you pull in that file. It could be an executable that you've gotten off a Dell site or off of some other site. You could pull in that executable. That's a bundle. It could be a bundle of multiple firmwares. You'd simply download the firmware. We would say new here, new firmware image, and we would go to, give it a name here, call it firmware for now, but we look for this Dell EMC IDRAC. and it is just device family firmware. And you basically just, I got to give a firmware version here, 2.5. And you would just go over to your, whatever it might be, go over to your image files and you would just download that, import that. Once you have that in here, it's going to be like any other firmware deployment where you can right click from here and say deploy the firmware and target the one or more servers that you want to go to. That's a very nice and important aspect, is that you can push your BIOS or your configuration, your firmware updates to all your servers at one time if you need to keep them all up to date. So it's a very nice way to do that. It's very similar to the way you do firmware deploy now with a switch. Okay, and then to wrap up this section, this whole page here, you're also going to see all the alerts related to your Redfish backups, your configuration restores, those kind of things will all show up in here again, just like any other switch configuration. So next we're going to go over to compliance. And for those that you may not know, this is the ability to scan your configuration files for specific criteria. And so I've got a couple here that I got actually one here, a group of policies, but I'm going to show you one here just as an example of how you would create a policy. It's the same as you would again for a switch or some other device. You can determine what you're going to back up here or what you're going to scan. And so the meat of this is in the criteria. And so you can simply cut and paste the either the XML or the JSON right out of one of those config files right into here and say, I want to scan for, example here, this workload profile must say not available, or this memory test must be disabled. And so you would basically build up your criteria here that you want to scan for, and then you can just schedule this to run at periodic intervals, and it will go and scan all of your interface or all of your devices for this criteria. And just like a switch, it will flag a failure if you're out of compliance. So it's a very nice way to keep your server configuration profiles in compliance. Or if a new server comes online, you would scan it automatically and it would basically tell you if you're set correctly, and then you can take action either automatically to correct these settings, or you could manually go in and update it so that you're back in compliance and rerun your compliance. And then again, you're going to have all the same functionality to have compliance-related events that come in when a compliance fails. You'll see there's some here on this page already. Your compliance history, and then also your remediation actions if you choose to create some sort of remediation to go and restore some a config file or something to restore some out of compliance condition. And then there's automation and actions. As I mentioned, we've already seen some actions on here. I'm just going to use the rack admin command that I had here before. And so there's the one we had before for the rack admin get command. Again, these are just simple actions that are scripted to show some basic command here. I've got rack admin and then the get option. And then over on my attributes, I have these attributes just saying these are the get options I want to allow users to have through this script. And so we already saw that at the beginning, how we were able to select one of these and execute it. But in the case of a group action, I wanted to show you that as well. You'd come over here and you could say execute. And then you'd want to say, I want to just see my servers, and I want to pick several of my servers out of here and say add selection, done. And I want to, again, go get my BIOS versions or whatever it is. Let's get BIOS versions again and say execute. And now it's going to go out and it's going to run those commands against all your devices and give you a feedback on what those are in each one. So it's a very nice way if you need to see just a specific set of devices, some setting. It's a very nice way to be able to do that in a group sort of fashion. Okay, so here see it's done. It's given us the 3 devices here. I can quickly scroll through and get the information of each one, what version. You see 255, 125, and 110. So it's basically giving us that information directly from the box. And then I guess again on the last thing here, one of the last things is performance side. Let me jump into the monitor dashboards here. I think I have one here. Yeah, so all of these attributes are available for performance dashboards. I think I have a simple one here, just a simple temperature. So if you need dashboards, and all these metrics are available for putting on a dashboard. And then if I didn't mention it right out of the gate on these, you'll notice that we do populate the ports for all of these, and so you have access to the ports to go and do various things, these topology, event management, links performance, as I mentioned. You can see key metrics from this level if you want as well. So a lot of flexibility there in how you get at the data and how you want to see it. In wrapping up here, do you want to mention a few things that maybe we didn't, or on my diagram that I didn't talk about? There's a feature at the top here where we're talking about monitoring application and services. We have a log manager tool that's coming out probably in Q1, Q2 of 2019. Just wanted to throw that out there. Some items around here that you can read in terms of things that it helps you do. But we'll be able to track logs in OMNM for the product. And so you can have any device send logs to the product, and then we can use the log manager to analyze those logs in further detail. So we'll dive into that and do in another feature when we talk about log manager. All right, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I hope that was informative for you. If you have any questions or want to request a schedule a trial, you can send your request to sales@dell-omnm.com. If you have questions, just feel free to shoot those over as well.